Hi, I'm McKenna Martinet, and this is my presentation on my artifact analysis for MAE 670. So I've started my presentation with a reminder of what those four MAE Program Learning Outcomes, or PLOs, are, and I'll be talking a lot about how my artifacts relate to each of these PLOs. Here is an overview of my plan of study, my curriculum map, where you'll see the legend for introduced, developed, and mastered. I have been teaching for 8 years, so I do feel like I've been able to master all of these PLOs in my classroom, but I really focused on designations for this assignment based on the artifacts that I selected for each course. However, I feel very confident that I have at the very least developed, but mostly mastered all of the PLOs. So let's start with MAE 610. Interestingly enough, I did actually take these classes out of order. I had taken all of my PLO courses and finished off with MAE 610 and 670. So for me, this artifact is the plan of study where I kind of charted out my masters, even though I had already taken all of these classes. So it aligned really well with PLO 4 because I was reflecting back on the courses that I took, and for 4 of those courses I annotated and said how they aligned to the PLOs. So really targeted PLO 4 for me because of the order in which I took the classes. So it was nice to reflect back on my pathway for my master's and reflect on how all of these courses can inform future instruction. My next course was SPD 604, Psychological Foundations of Education. The artifact is a paper that I wrote after I researched Erikson's psychosocial theory, and then I had to provide real-life connections to this theory. I aligned this with PLO 3 and 4. It aligns really well with 4 because it required me to research a theory in order to get a better understanding of it, and then I had to reflect on that theory in relation to my own experiences. It also required me to find areas for growth in the future, and it also targeted PLO 3 because the research helped to inform future instruction in my classroom, which I've continued to use. My next course is SPD 608, Exceptionalities. The artifact is a paper that I wrote based on the experience of observing a 9th through 11th grade PE classroom. It included a pre-observation where I researched the school and the course, and then it has my observation notes and a post-observation reflection. I aligned this with PLO 3 because it targets the component of studying instruction, and I did this through observation, in a traditional learning environment. This component was developed and mastered since I had to observe a class, and then I took it a step further to reflect on the lesson that I observed and identify areas of growth that I could incorporate into my own classroom. My next course was TED 606, Equity and Diversity. The artifact is an annotated bibliography. It required me to review and study 2 articles about LGBTQ students, and then I had to take what I learned from that research and apply it to my own teaching experience. I aligned this with PLO 4. It helped me develop the component of developing reflective practices that are grounded in current learning research. It required me to research the needs of this group of students, LGBTQ students, and then it had me master that PLO 4 because I had to reflect on what I learned in order to identify pathways for continuous growth in my own classroom. This is the course TED 621A, Language Development Methods for Elementary School, which is perfect because I have been a first grade teacher for the last 8 years. So this is actually a lesson that I designed to teach students about nutrition, and the big emphasis here was on adaptations for a particular EL student. So I had a whole case study about the student, and I had to make adaptations for that English learner student. I aligned this with PLO 2 because I had to design a learning experience and it had to include learner characteristics like this particular EL student. I also mastered PLO 3 here because I had to apply knowledge and strategies I learned about ELs from my previous research, and then I used that to inform instruction and design this lesson in a traditional learning environment. And this has been really helpful in my teaching because I constantly have EL students in my classroom. Next up, we have TED 621B, Reading and Language Arts Methods. This is a similar artifact. This is a language arts lesson, though, that I designed, and the purpose was to teach students about rhyming with an emphasis on adaptations, again, for EL students. I align this with the PLO 2 component of designing a learning experience that includes learner characteristics because, again, I had to make adaptations for English learner students. I also mastered PLO 3 because I had to apply the knowledge and strategies of previous research about ELs and then use that to design this lesson and inform instruction in a traditional learning environment. Then we have TED 635, Curriculum Assessment Instruction, focusing on social studies, PE, and art. The artifact is actually a unit lesson plan. So I incorporated social studies, PE, and arts lessons together to teach citizenship to a kindergarten class. So a big emphasis on this assignment was how I was going to assess and evaluate and use that to inform future instruction or reteach. So I aligned this to the mastery of PLO 1. The component is integrating advanced approaches to instruction, assessment, and learning using digital tools. I did incorporate those into my unit plan. And I also aligned this artifact to PLO 2 because it had me develop my skills of designing a learning experience that included assessments. So again, this assignment really focused on how important assessing is and how that can help me design future lessons or reteach what I have already taught. Next, we have TED 636, Methods on Math and Science. So this is another unit lesson plan, but it was instead of incorporating all of those other subjects, it is math and science, fractions, and science investigative skills, again, focusing on methods for assessment and evaluation. And again, this aligned really well to the mastery of PLO 1. I had to use advanced approaches to instruction, assessment, and learning using digital tools again. And I had to design multiple lessons with assessments using a lot of different tools and lesson types and different types of assessment. So I also aligned this to PLO 2 since it had me master my skills of designing a learning experience that included assessments. Next up was my induction program. I was able to transfer my credits for my 2-year induction program that I took in order to clear my credential. So this artifact is kind of a long one. It's an individualized learning plan or an inquiry, and it includes 3 instances where I had to do research, lesson planning, and reflection. So the first example on this inquiry is a professional development session that I went to, and then I used that research to teach a lesson based on those skills. And then the second example was an observation of teachers at another school, and I used what I learned from them to implement new centers into my classroom. And then finally, the last example in this inquiry was research on homework and statistics on how useful that is. And then I used that research to incorporate a new homework routine into my classroom. They all included reflections as well. So this artifact really aligned well with all 4 PLOs. It demonstrated how I designed learning experiences using strategies that took into account my students' different needs and learning characteristics like their age and their developmental stage and prior experiences from our school year. It also showed how I customized lessons to meet those needs and then followed up with assessments to adapt future lessons or reteach. And it also demonstrated PLO 3 as well, since it included research I did for each of these instances. I had to do research before implementing lessons. And then, of course, targets PLO 4 as well, because then I had to reflect and, look over my observations and go back through my online research and see how I could better future lessons and continually grow from these experiences. And then lastly, this course, MAE 670, Applied Practitioner Research and Customized Study. I chose the artifact of the practitioner research proposal. So I had to analyze 5 studies, and I chose to look at the effects of a social emotional learning program on student behaviors, more specifically elementary behaviors. And then I used that research to design my own study based on SEL lessons and student behaviors. So this aligned really well with PLOs 2, 3, and 4. I aligned this to PLO 2 since I had to take into account learner characteristics when designing my own research study proposal. And I also aligned it to PLO 3 since I had to use that research to inform the study. I used what I learned from the studies to make my own study. And then finally, I aligned it with PLO 4 because I had to reflect on that current research and use that to inform future classes, so SEL lessons and studies. So this one was a really nice one to master PLOs 2, 3, and 4 for me. Overall, I do feel like I mastered all 4 of the PLOs. I think this was just a small sample of artifacts that I did in all of these courses, and especially I feel like my induction program really gave me the experiences that I needed to use all of these PLOs and show mastery there. So I feel very excited with where I've come on all 4 of those PLOs, and thank you for your time in watching my presentation.